give your full name as it is recorded on the birth certificate?
Dennis Thornton Fitzpatrick.
Do you have a nickname? If so, did you acquire it in the military?
No, my nickname, if I have a nickname, it's now it's either Coach Fitz or Fitz versus Dennis.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Harrison County, in Clarksburg, suburb of Clarksburg called Stonewood, West Virginia. I lived there the first 18 years of my life.
What was your job in the military?
I was a crew chief on a Air Force F-4C fighter jet.
What was your first unit duty station, or with what unit duty station did you spend most of your military service?
I was with the 4453rd Tactical Air Command OEMS squadron located at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. Spent 3.5 years there.
What do you remember most about your military service?
Well, being a young individual, I was 18 years old when I joined the military. Actually, I was 17 years old when I joined the military and had to wait until I turned 18. And it was all the diversity that you see that back in those days, it was still some problems with race, just coming out of segregation, and I was never accustomed to having any problems with blacks, and that was the first time I actually knew that there was some racial tensions in the world. I mean, coming from a small town in West Virginia and going to San Antonio, Texas, and then to Amarillo, Texas, and then my permanent station at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. We still had some conflicts with blacks and whites. I never had any conflicts, but I've seen it. So I think maybe just the diversity that you had to see and some of the different things that you heard talked about but didn't know it actually existed.
How did you feel about your first assignment?
Well, you know, you're trained to do what you're going to eventually do in the military, and of course it's a whole new world. After being regimented so closely in the military in your first 12 weeks of basic and then in your training school, and then when you go to your permanent station, it's just like a job. I went to work at 8 o'clock in the morning if that was my shift I was on, and quit at 4 o'clock in the evening, and when that was over, you know, I just spent my days just like any other normal civilian. But you know, going out and actually doing the job that you were trained to do, and you were, as a crew chief, I was in charge of a multi-million-dollar aircraft, and the pilots that come out to fly that aircraft, you know, their safety was in my hands. So I mean, being 18 years old and that type of a responsibility, you know, it's kind of scary. You know, at the same time, it's exciting, but you know, you got to think it's kind of scary to do something like that and be responsible for such a piece of equipment.
Did you feel the need to enlist, or were you drafted?
I felt the need to enlist. Back at that time, 1964, of course, the Vietnam conflict had just started, and everybody was my age was getting drafted, and my draft number was coming up, and I didn't want to be in the infantry. You know, I wanted to stay out of that if I could. So I went and talked to the Air Force recruiter, and you had to be tested to see if you were material to be chosen to be in the Air Force. You just couldn't walk in, and you had to be tested in that time. So I went ahead and got tested and passed all the tests, and was what they call early enlisted. And then when I turned 18 years old, first time they had a chance to go ahead and send me to basic training, I left. So I went ahead and enlisted versus being drafted.
Were you allowed to choose your branch of service? If not, what branch of service did you wish to enter?
Yes, again, the Army, you could just go ahead and enlist and didn't have to do anything special. Same way with the Marine Corps. I think the Navy, you also had to be tested. But I wanted to join the Air Force. I talked to different recruiters and different people that was involved with the military at that time, and I wanted to try to go into the Air Force, and that's why I selected that.
Did you experience combat?
No, I never had to. And again, that's the reason that I chose to enlist versus being drafted, and then I didn't have to. I was hoping I didn't have to face any combat. So no, I did not have to do that.
What engagements, battles did you experience?
None. And again, some of the people from our unit, they did get transferred to Vietnam and did see some combat, but I was lucky enough that I did not have to go to that.
What were your feelings toward the enemy?
Well, whenever you join the military, you swear to uphold all the Constitution of the United States and to protect and to serve her for whatever the enemy would be. At that time, of course, our enemy was our overseas enemy was Vietnam. So, again, we had to protect and serve all parts of the United States, and so that's what I tried to do.
How long after the war was it before you were able to talk candidly about being in service?
There were some things in the military that you did not talk about. Once you served your time in the military, you had a debriefing where they talked to you about things that you saw and things you heard during your military life, and you're not supposed to talk about certain things. So as soon as I got home, I could talk about my time in the military. I didn't have any real bad things that happened to me in the military, so it wasn't really restricted to me not being able to talk about it. And as far as emotionally, it never did bother me emotionally to be in the military. So I guess I was probably one of the lucky ones.
What was your opinion of your officers?
It seemed like in the military, most of the branches of service had the same rank of officers, and the Air Force started with the second lieutenant. That's a brand new officer that comes out of officer candidate school or comes out of one of the academies. And then the higher it goes, of course, the highest that you have is a 5-star general, and that's General of the United States military. And probably the largest or the highest ranking officer that I ever had to talk to was maybe a 1 or 2-star general. And they were just common folk. Of course, you had to respect the officers in the military, and I had no problem doing that. But it seemed like the higher the rank that you talked to, the more down to earth these folks were. I can remember a large African American. He was a full bird colonel, is what we call a full bird colonel. In the military, he was just a colonel, and his name was McDaniels, Colonel McDaniels, and he made general while I was still in the military. And he was a monstrous of a man. He wasn't obese. He was just a monstrous of a man. And he would come out to fly our aircraft, and we called him Colonel Mack. And we were allowed to go up and help these officers get into the cockpits of the aircraft. Of course, that was part of our duties. And this gentleman had to roll his shoulders in as tight as he could so you could close the canopy on the aircraft so he could be safe in it. But he was a large man. But it seemed like the newer officers, to answer the question, it seemed like the newer officers, the second lieutenants and the first lieutenants, were more, they wanted separation between the enlisted man and the officer versus, again, the higher rank that you go, they treated you just like a human being. But I didn't have any bad experiences with officers, and of course I respected all officers, so that's just part of the job.
Were you aware of any officers that had been promoted from the ranks? If so, what were your opinion of them?
Well, if I did know of any enlisted man that went to being a commissioned officer, and I can't for the life of me think of their rank, but it's actually a rank between enlisted man and an officer. And I might think of it while I'm talking, but most of those guys, if they went that route, they were very down to earth people. They knew what it was like to be an enlisted man. Now they're an officer, so they would treat you with the utmost respect, versus maybe that first or second lieutenant that would not see you as another human being. They just see you as maybe a lower class individual that was working for them. Had no problems at all with any of those.
Were you aware of any foreign nationals in your outfit or any other unit?
No.
Did you take part in any actions at night?
Not sure what that question means.
Did you partake in any practices or drills at nighttime?
Well, yeah, we did nighttime flights, but we worked right around the clock. We had 3 different shifts at our permanent station. And I don't recall if it was 7 to 3 or 8 to 4 and 3 to 11 and 11 to 7 or 4 to 8 and 12 to 8. I don't remember the shifts, but we had different shifts. And if we worked the evening shift, then we might have had some nighttime flights with our aircraft. And I guess you could refer to that as nighttime activities.
Do you have any experiences in the mud?
No, not in the military. Not in my branch of the military. I did not.
What observations, if any, do you have about dust and its influence on military life?
Well, again, at Davis Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, it was in the desert. And it's very, very flat. You can't, I don't think that the average layperson or the civilian can imagine what I'm talking about when I say that we worked on the flight line. They might think that that's just a column of concrete, but there was acres and acres of concrete that we worked on, and it was wide open. And we would get dust storms in Arizona, and you had to then protect your aircraft. You had a canopy that was made out of very thick plexiglass, would be the easiest way to describe it. And the sand and the wind and sand would blow so hard that it could pit the canopy. And you had to protect that when windstorms come. Then you had to, of course, protect also the engines, because the sand could actually pit the parts of the engine that was exposed. So you had to cover up the intakes of your engines, and also had to cover your different pieces of equipment on an aircraft needs to be covered to protect it from those dust and sandstorms.
Okay, can you describe the working conditions of working for the U.S. Air Force?
Again, it was pretty much after you got to your permanent station, and all the people that I was involved with that did similar jobs that I did, and also different jobs on the Air Force base. Again, it's just actually almost like a 9-to-5 job outside of the military. You just go to work, and if you do what you're supposed to do, you don't have any problems. You had meetings you had to attend. You had training sessions you had to attend. It's just another job, but it's operated by the military. So, again, in the Air Force versus being in another branch of service might be a little different, because, again, we had a job we had to do, and we knew what we had to do. We knew how to do it, and we just go to work and do it. And again, it's just pretty much a regular job, just like a civilian would have.
Describe what it was like to return home. Did you receive an elaborate welcome? Was it positive or negative for the most part?
Again, coming from the Air Force, I did not have any negative reactions when I came back from the military. I never had any problems at all finding employment once I got out of the military. I got out of the military in July of 1968, and I think I started work in August of 1968 at a branch of a corporation out of Pittsburgh. I worked there in Clarksburg. But I had no negative reaction at all from coming from the military. Later on, during the Vietnam conflict, when a lot of the people started protesting over how long the war was going on, then some of those people had negative reactions. I know when they come home, especially the ones that had to fight over in the Vietnam jungles, during that time. But no, I had no problems whatsoever.
Do you have any memorable moments from being in the Air Force?
Again, I think being in the Air Force, I was lucky that I didn't have to face any conflicts, and you meet lifelong friends in the military. It's not to say that once you get out that you stay in constant contact with them, but you could probably call somebody that you served with and tell them that you're in some type of a plight, and you'd probably get pretty favorable reaction from them. So I think that would be the best thing. One of the things that was very unique to me, because again, I came from a small town in rural West Virginia, getting to travel. Yeah, I left home when I was 18 years old and bussed up to Fairmont. From there, I think we went in vans up to Pittsburgh International Airport, and I jumped on a plane. I'd seen planes, and I didn't have a whole lot of dealings with airplanes, and flew from there to San Antonio, Texas. And then you get to see other parts of the country that you wouldn't have got to see if you hadn't been in the military. So that's probably the most memorable occasions was to travel.
Did you visit any exotic or memorable places while in the Air Force?
I don't know about exotic, but you travel again. And I went from Texas to Arizona, and then I went from Texas on temporary duties, different places. Once was in California, and one time was in Arkansas. Being in Tucson, we were only, I'm thinking somewhere between 25 and 50 miles from the Mexican border, and back at that time it was okay to go into Mexico without having any problems. So we went to Mexico on occasion, and just Grand Canyon, seeing the Grand Canyon. Again, just getting to travel and see some sights.
Did you make use of the GI Bill when you left the military?
Yes, matter of fact, I did. After I left the military, I went to work at the Jones and Laughlin Steel Corporation Supply Division in Clarksburg, and again, it was in August of '68. And the gentleman I worked for, his name was Russell G. Wallace. He was from Kentucky, and I worked under his command all that time, and we had some down times, and we would sit around chit-chatting, and once he found out I was military, he said, "You ever think about going to college?" And I said, "Nah, no one in my family ever went to college." And he said, "Well, you got opportunity to use the GI Bill." He said, "You should look into it and take advantage of that." So I did, and long story short, Burrow Langford was a gentleman that worked here at Glenville State College in enrollment and registration, and at that time, if you were military, you were automatically accepted to Glenville State College. You didn't have to take any type of test to get into college. So I started college in February of 1970 and went straight through, graduated in 1973 with a 4-year degree, Bachelor of Arts degree in Business Administration, minor in Marketing and Retailing. So yes, I did take advantage of GI Bill.
Do you have anything else that you would like to add about your experiences?
Well, I have talked, and I've talked to other military people since I served in the military, and we all kind of feel the same way, that we think that any healthy male should have to spend at least 2 years in the military. It develops your discipline. It develops your self-worth. It develops a lot of things that you don't develop on the outside. Today's generation, I don't think, can appreciate what military is all about and what military can do for a person's life. You have to grow up pretty quick when you're in the military, because back in my time, and I guess today's world, it's pretty much the same way. If you go to the military as an 18-year-old individual, and some of the old timers back in World War I, World War II, they went to the military before they turned 18. They lied about it to get into the military, but they wanted to serve in the military. And you have to grow up pretty quick, because you're thrown into to a life and death situation, and I mean that literally. It's life or death out there when you have to go to another third world country and start fighting for your country and for your life. So it's a good experience, and I think that anybody that is kind of undecided about what they want to do with their life, they should think about the military and go and serve and see how quick you can grow up. You have lifelong experiences from the military. Wouldn't trade it for the world.
Did you receive any medals or honors or certificates while in the Air Force?
I did. One of the first things you earn is a expert marksman ribbon or medal, and even in the Air Force, we had to, during basic training, you had to learn how to shoot a. Back at that time, it was M1 rifle. So I got one of those, and then you get your what is referred to as your general medals and ribbons, which I did. I didn't get anything, what I would call exciting, because I never served in any war-torn situations, such as any kind of a Bronze Star or things like that. No, I did not. But general ribbons, good conduct medals, etc. I did receive those. But and I got some certificates that I've included in this packet that I'm giving to you that you can look at and see what those were. But nothing special.
Well, thank you for your service to this country and for taking time to do this interview.
My pleasure. Thank you.